The English edition. My name is Adrian Yeo. Today we're going to discuss about the case of Scorpene and also the Great Malaysian Robbery. With us today we have YB Sivarasa, Member of Parliament of Subang. We also have Cynthia Gabriel, the Director of Suaram. Welcome back to the show, Cynthia.
Thank you, Adrian.
Did you enjoy your spring in Paris?
Enjoy would not be the best way to describe it, but it was a very productive trip. It was a full working trip for 4 full days with the lawyers. We also had the opportunity to be before the judge to present Suaram's witness statement and to also provide a potential list of witnesses in which we had to argue for each of the witnesses why they were relevant to the ongoing case. So to our surprise and to our delight, the judge not only accepted our witness statement in totality, but he also accepted the arguments in relation to each of the witnesses and why each of them were important and played a role in contributing towards trying to solve the many questions that have arisen as a result of the preliminary inquiry that has taken place. And to be very frank in describing the list of witnesses range from the directors of Mecca, which is the company at the center of the inquiry, the company that received the commissions of the 114.9 million euro, right up to the defense minister currently and also formerly. And the former defense minister, we all know, is now the current prime minister, which is Najib Razaks. So even his name was accepted as a potential witness. And the judge has accepted it very openly and has also told us that these names would play a very important role in helping to ascertain how the inquiry will actually proceed from here. But it will completely be at his discretion to decide who he would call first and when the witnesses would be subpoenaed.
And during the sessions, there were this new name that was brought up, Rasiah. Probably you can tell us more about it.
Okay. There were many things that were revealed to us when we were in Paris. We had before us privileged access to the investigation papers that were a result of the 2-year investigations by the Public Prosecutor Office. So it was a very detailed, very well-documented investigation by the Prosecutor's Office, and there were 153 documents in total. And everything's in French, of course. So we really, with the help of interpreters and the help of lawyers, had to go through very, very complicated, complex, and mind-boggling documents, because what we discovered in the papers were a whole trail of new companies that were formed, both on the French side as well as on the Malaysian side. And these companies were actually formed to complicate the money trail, to complicate the sweeteners that each of these companies were actually receiving. And so one of the revelations or one of the discoveries was this new company called Terasasi. Terasasi Sendirian Berhad was a company that was formed in Malaysia, and there's no prizes for guessing who the directors are. It's again Abdul Razak Baginda, and this time, instead of his wife, it's his father that's the co-director.
So
because in Mecca, his wife was in partnership with him in the whole thing. So Abdul Razak Baginda and his family members are very much present in many of the investigation papers. And so Terasasi became a point of interest and a mystery that needed to be resolved, because Terasasi was one of those companies that received direct commissions from DCNS and from Thales International Asia, another French company which was formed with an Asian division. With an Asian division. So in short, it was called Tint Asia, and Tint Asia was the one that actually paid monies to Terasasi. And so who really is Terasasi is the question that begs to be answered.
And also, what service do they provide in the whole process? What service?
What services? Well, it just a company that did not actually have very concrete portfolio or description of what it was doing. But I think the added mystery was that we found another company, another branch in Hong Kong, Terasasi in Hong Kong.
Okay.
And that branch in Hong Kong continues to operate until today. But the Malaysian company has now been closed off. Okay. And there are many questions about why the Malaysian branch was closed off and why Tint Asia had channeled the money to Hong Kong. And that money actually went to whom and for what purpose. So that needs to be further investigated. And so the judge will be placing this as a very important priority for him, because in one of the documents he had actually stated that some of the monies that were paid may have actually gone to not just Razak Baginda, but it may also have gone to the other Razak, which could be Najib Razak. And I use the word could be because this is what the documents say very specifically, and this is what the judge is investigating in detail. There is a couple of invoices that were found together with the prosecution's office, which actually shocked us, because one of the invoices amounting to Euro 360,000 was actually accompanied with a handwritten note signed off by this person called Razak to make an urgent payment into his bank account. And that bank account was actually given to the Thales International Asia to put in the money into the bank account in order for him to receive the money hurriedly, urgently, and it was signed by Razak. So the other thing that's also going on is to ascertain who that handwriting belongs to. And that is being investigated by the judge as well. So there are many interesting elements about the formation, the establishment, and the existence of Terasasi. What was its purpose? What was the objective, and who actually gained from that money? Because alongside with the 360,000 euro, Terasasi was receiving regular payments from Tint Asia. So this was like a payment that was not according to the schedule.
So unless there's a third Razak, so we would know who the two Razaks are. Potentially.
Well, the mystery surrounds two Razaks, so I don't think there's a place for a third Razak. But it becomes a very important issue for Malaysian people to know which Razak is actually being in question here, because one is our current Prime Minister, and he needs to be accountable to the Malaysian people.
YB Sivarasa, they were saying that bringing this case to the French court, it's a little bit unpatriotic, and even our minister, the Defense Minister Zaid Hamidi, also mentioned that the French court have no power or jurisdiction towards what happened in Malaysia. Could you comment a little bit on that?
Well, I don't consider Suaram's actions unpatriotic, because we know that the reason why this went to France is because the Malaysian authorities refused to investigate the issues of corruption connected to the purchase of the Scorpene submarines.
But there is ongoing case of Altan Tuya.
Yeah, that's also connected. We are looking at the allegation of corruption in the purchase of the submarines. This has been discussed a lot, debated a lot in Parliament, brought up consistently by the opposition MPs, because it is Malaysian public money that was spent. We have spent billions of our money. Now it's totaling over 7 billion, and the original amount suspected to be paid corruptly was this amount of 114 euros, which is about 550 million ringgit, which is a huge sum of money. That is the one paid to Parimeka. And because there were no answers forthcoming here, we had no option, or Suaram had no option, but to take it to France, And this is the irony about the whole thing, that the French authorities are prepared to investigate what happened to Malaysian public money, but the Malaysian government is not prepared to do anything. And this for me is the biggest irony of this whole exercise. It is our money.
Yep.
This is not French money.
Nope.
Not 1 cent of French money was wasted, was corruptly paid. But it is Malaysian money, and yet they are prepared to investigate it because of the possibility that corrupt payments were made to either their own officials or involving their companies. But this is the sad state of affairs. So that is why, we hope now that with the French investigation, we will begin to find out more, and that process has started, because you see, until this investigation opened and the Suaram, Cynthia and Dr. Kwan and others went to Paris, we mainly knew about the payment to Parimeka, the 550 million ringgit. And now suddenly this company Terasasi has surfaced. And we're talking about substantial payments. We're talking about another 30 million euros, 144 million ringgit. Again, this is obviously Malaysian public money, Malaysian taxpayers' money. And we now know that Terasasi was set up in Malaysia. It was then mysteriously closed. It is operating in Hong Kong. It is just basically like a shelf company. It's doing no substantial business. So obviously, we can see it like 142, one of 142 companies listed, in this 19th floor of a building in Hong Kong, in Wan Chai district. It's the typical kind of shelf company used for money laundering. We can, I think, draw that conclusion. And this is the way corrupt money is funneled around. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, now we hope that the investigation will continue to pursue these money trails and, find out more about what's going. In relation to Altan Tuya, that is the other aspect of this whole transaction, the murder of Altan Tuya, again to which no real answers have come from the Malaysian trial. Of course, we know that the 2 police officers have been convicted and are sentenced to death. But everybody knows, not just Malaysians, I think the entire world knows, and every Malaysian knows that these 2 police officers who are now convicted had no motive to kill her. No motive, meaning they were what you call the gun that was used to shoot her. They were the instrument. But the key question is, who pulled the trigger?
Yep.
In other words, who instructed them to kill her? It's quite basic. You don't have to go to university to study law to understand the basic logic of this. But the unfortunate part is, in the entire process in this country, from the time the police investigated the case, to the time the Aegis Chambers considered the file, to the time the trial took place with all the witnesses, this question was not allowed to be asked. Even in court, this question was not allowed to be asked. So it showed how the whole process is manipulated to prevent this question being asked, which is who directed these 2 to kill her. Now, of course, going back to France, besides, I think, the witnesses that Cynthia just mentioned, private investigator Bala Subramaniam is on the witness list. He may be called. Altan Tuya's father, Setef Sharibu, is also on the witness list. And who knows, in the process of this investigation and perhaps a trial further on, Malaysians might get to know much more about the way or the reason Adrian Yeo was killed than what we have learned from the Malaysian trial process. We don't know. And I hope we find out, you know, that we find that this trial process in France will help us get to the truth, will help Adrian Yeo's father and family get to the truth, so that they can at least have closure on her death, and one day, you know, there'll be justice delivered in terms of the real, what I call the real murderers. Of course, these two policemen should be punished because they killed her, but the real murderer who caused the murder should also be brought to justice. And there are many indications already that the Prime Minister himself, Najib, his wife Rosma, and certainly Razak Baginda have a lot to answer in terms of questions related to themselves and the connection to Adrian Yeo's murder.
Well, the names in the list of to be caught, the names of
witnesses.
Sorry, list of witnesses that will be caught are familiar names to us. But back to the statement just now that the French court have no jurisdictions on these witnesses. How far can we go from here?
Well, I don't think it's accurate to say the French court has no jurisdiction. What we heard today is Zahid Hamidi, the Minister for Defence, saying, or rather trying to give the impression that the French court, the French judicial system cannot touch them, cannot touch us in Malaysia. I'm afraid that statement reflects his complete ignorance of the French legal system. I would advise him to get a French lawyer quickly to advise him properly on the French law, the French judicial system, what is going on there. Because if he had a good French lawyer, he would understand that what he said is completely wrong. What can happen in terms of the witness list, including him and including Najib and the other names, is that the two magistrates who are in charge of the French investigation can issue subpoenas. Subpoenas is like a witness summons to those witnesses. Then what will happen is, that is if they decide that witness is relevant first, If that witness then does not answer the summons, they will then issue another, it's like a summons, but it's a, shall we say, a stronger version of the summons, which directs that witness to appear. It's like a final warning, you must respond to the summons or the subpoena. Now, if then the witness still doesn't respond, I mean, in others, that summons will be served on the witness here, of course, so that the person knows about it. All right, and that can be done through the French embassy here or some legal process here. It's not difficult to organize. If the witness still refuses, then the French magistrates will issue a warrant of arrest, for the witness to come, and they can then also make the next decision. If they feel the witness is important enough, they will then use Interpol, the Interpol mechanism. They will issue what is called a red alert, where then for the witnesses who are outside France, for inside France, no problem, you just use the French police. But for witnesses outside France, you use the Interpol service, and which means witnesses like Razak Baginda, who are in London, Zahid Hamidi here, even Najib himself, can be at risk of arrest by Interpol. But certainly, if they choose to travel anywhere within Europe, or if they're in France, then they can be arrested on site in France, for example.
Arrested to go on trial?
Arrested for the offence of not answering a witness summons, and then of course compelled to appear in the investigation.
Moving forward, Cynthia, what's the next step in the French courts now that we have the list of witnesses and now we know that there are more companies involved? What's going on?
Okay, I think there's a couple more interesting elements that have evolved. The first to recognize is that the inquiry that has opened is actually a civil suit between Suaram and the French shipbuilding company DCNS. This inquiry opened on the 16th of March, And there were 2 judges who were actually appointed to oversee and investigate the case. So it's very much like a judicial inquiry. And the judge in France actually has powers to both try witnesses that appears before them, and also they possess investigative powers, which means that while the witnesses come forward, they also have powers to maybe travel to different places, to go probe into certain elements that have appeared in the public prosecution's documents. For example, the company Terasasi would be a very important point of investigation for the judge. So he would be probing into the formation of Terasasi, the objectives, the reasons. So the entire inquiry will then come together. But very, very interestingly, when we went to France, we also discovered that as a result of the civil suit, a criminal investigation had also convened. And a criminal investigation is still at an investigation stage, convened by the French government on several DCNS officials on the complaints of corruption practices and the fact that they may have violated the OECD convention, which disallows bribery from the year 2000 onwards, because France had signed the OECD convention. So if this criminal investigation finds enough prima facie evidence to charge certain individuals, which we understand from our French lawyers, there is a very large possibility that the criminal investigations may lead to something more. Then they have also told us that the witness list in the civil suit may be then also applicable to the criminal charge. And so they could then be placed on the suspects list. And if that happens, then the list of witnesses that we have presented will have a lot to worry about. But we are unable to say anything more on the criminal investigations at this stage because it has just convened, and we will be getting further updates from our lawyers. So our lawyers have also tried to place Suaram as a party to the criminal investigations, but that has not been very easy for the very reasons that we actually live outside the French territory. Okay, so that's the first thing, and I think the explanation of YB Siva about the long arm of the law and how far it can reach Malaysians. There's actually a lot that the judge can do. So it would be quite ignorant for our ministers and Prime Minister to think that they can continue to hide behind the rationale of sovereignty and hide behind this whole thing about we are a sovereign nation, so we don't have to answer to any accountability mechanisms. So Suaram has actually demanded that MECC open an investigation immediately, given these new findings that have unraveled itself, because there is no more excuse about what the silence of MECC is about. There is no more excuse. They have to open an investigation. And if they don't, it's really going to be so embarrassing that a foreign country is investigating Malaysian taxpayers' money being abused. So this is really a very serious thing. The next thing I want to say is that in the coming parliament session, which I hope our conscientious MPs like Siva and others will actually take up the question of the actual list of companies that have surfaced in the investigation, because we are no longer talking about Perimeka alone, and we are no longer talking about Terasasi as a possible second mysterious company. We're talking about a trail of companies, small, new, and even Lembaga Tabung Haji being dragged into the procurement process for further investments in France. We would like to demand, we insist actually, that the Defence Minister presents to Parliament the full list of companies that that have been involved in the procurement process. And I think this is a very basic right to know, right to be informed of what kinds of companies were actually involved in the procurement process, how much money had actually been exchanged. Because just by scanning through some of the documents, one of the fears or one of the shocks was that the amounts of money could actually be larger than the contract size. The very fact that our defense minister at that time, Najib, had placed a condition that Perimecca should be paid up to $1 billion US for their stay in France. Now that's what the document says, for their stay in France. And we certainly don't think it's for an expensive hotel. Stay must mean to stay in the contract. But whatever it is, that amount of USD 1 billion was a condition that was placed at an earlier stage for Perimecca to establish a very strong partnership in France in the whole procurement process. But of course we know that in the end, the commission that was paid out to Perimecca was 114.9 million euro. So from what was asked, what was demanded, there were lots of negotiations that took place from July 2001 up to the signing of the contract in 2002, where Perimecca received so much money. But now the question before us and the question for the judge is to see maybe that 1 billion adds up to many of the different payments that have already been made up. And this is what needs to be established, this is what needs to be investigated. So we again urge for the fullest cooperation of the Malaysian government before it becomes more and more embarrassing for the current administration's leadership, because there's only so much that can be hidden. As you know, French officials will also be called to testify before the inquiry, and whatever information that comes out from the French officials and from DCNS officials, the story is going to be made known for the whole world to know and to hear. So there is very little rationale to hide behind sovereignty, to hide behind the fact that they don't respect the investigation that is taking place in another country, and to actually display such arrogance that really begs for some sort of punishment to be meted out to them. And I suppose the Malaysian people have a chance to do it with the coming general elections.
Well, talking about elections, France have just had an election and they have a new president now. Will this help, or what's the effect on this case now? I
think it has some important bearing on the case because, for example, if Sarkozy had won the election, then I think it'll be reasonable to say that perhaps there will be some constraint on the investigations. I think the change of government, the change of government back to the socialist government under Hollande, I think will like clear the decks and allow the investigation to go as far as possible with the minimum of political pressure or the need to cover up. So I think for us as Malaysians, the outcome of the election is a good outcome for the prospect of this investigation, and I'm personally quite pleased with that. Going back to what Cynthia just said, about the monies that were paid, this will be opened up in the June Parliament session, starting from 11th of June. I'm sure we'll be asking questions about these new findings and what they have. I think the Prime Minister and particularly the Defence Minister will have problems to explain this new sum of 33 million euro, 140 over million ringgit, which has suddenly appeared. And this is not a small sum, and this sum has never been mentioned in any of the earlier answers in Parliament given to MPs like Tian Chua and others who have been asking for a detailed breakdown of what was the expenditure. So we know the expenditure on Scorpene with all the other equipment has cost over 7 billion. But this is a huge payment, and they need to explain this. And the indication I get from the other documents that have been seen, there are other sizable amounts mentioned, much even bigger than this. So it would appear that what we have been told in Parliament so far, appears to be only a part of the picture, and there are some major things that are being hidden from the Malaysian Parliament and from the Malaysian public.
Cynthia, anything to add on to before we close on?
I think there are a couple of next steps that we will be quite interested to follow up urgently with this case, because for one, we will be having making efforts for the lawyers to actually apply for a work visa to come to Malaysia to brief their clients, which is Suaram. And as you know, William Bourdon, one of the most well-known lawyers in France, was quite unceremoniously deported from Malaysia in July. And the reasons given by the Home Ministry was that he did not apply for a work visa to talk to Suaram at that time, to have meetings with Suaram. So in this case, we have actually discussed with them, and they have filed an application for a work visa. We await to see if it will be rejected or if it will be approved. If we continue to be denied the very basic rights to have access to our lawyers in this case, then there is no choice but to find a way to meet them somewhere in a neighboring location. But that meeting must happen, because it's very important for the media and the public in this region, in which many first world countries actually target with arms trade and the selling of weapons which are below the standard that is actually required. So we get many experiences of arms procurement which have fallen below the acceptable standards. So it's very important for this case to be highlighted, so that it never ever gets repeated, and that countries around us will also realize that there's so much that has gone wrong in the name of national security and in the name of national safety, all in the name of purchasing weapons to safeguard our territories. We have actually experienced one of Malaysia's greatest robberies, amounting to millions and millions of euro. And how much would that convert to when it actually gets spelled out in ringgit Malaysia? So that is one element that I think we need to definitely continue. The other is to actually assist in also providing more investigative work, which I think Suaram and many other organizations are now very interested to do, on the many companies that have actually surfaced, because it really is our responsibility to also check and find out where these companies are placed in the registrar of companies, and whether they still exist and whether they don't, and so on. So whatever documentation we can provide from our side to France would be extremely useful in helping to push the case forward. And while we know with a lot of concern that the timing of the case is completely out of our control and is entirely up to the judge, and there's no way we can say, please hurry up because so and so. I mean, it is a fairly independent judiciary, much more than ours. So I think the facts before us just very much builds on the need for the Malaysian public institutions to start playing its role, from the judiciary right up to the fact that the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission has remained silent up to this moment. So I think to also add a little bit about Altantuya, the father of Altantuya has also been accepted as a witness. So he believes that his daughter has told him several things about the money trail and the commission trail. And she had in fact told him that she was going to receive 0.3 or 0.03. He can't remember the exact zero, but he knows it ends with a 3 of the overall sale of the commission.
Percentage, 0.03%.
Percentage of the overall sale of the contract. So it is very interesting because I believe, and I think many Malaysians believe, that the reason Altan Tuya was silenced in such a brutal manner was because she obviously knew a lot of the information of the money trail. And if the father can actually shed some light on some of the negotiations that may have taken place in her presence, then that would certainly help to answer some questions about her murder, and also many other unanswered questions for the Malaysian people.
Well, definitely there are many unanswered questions. Thank you, Suaram, for pursuing this all up the way to this French court. Thank you, viewers, for staying tuned. We will have more updates from the French courts when it resumes trial. In the meantime, if you like what you're seeing today, give us the thumbs up at the bottom of the screen. Share with your friends and families on Facebook and on Twitter as well. So this is Adrian Yeo signing off. Thank you, YB Sivarasa, Member of Parliament for Subang. Cynthia, Gabriel, Director from Suaram. Thank you so much for coming here today. This is me, Adrian Yeo, Rakyat Bersuara, the English edition.